April 1945, southern Germany. At a temporary American prisoner of war compound, the camp's main water pump stopped before sunrise. The army mechanic who understood it had already been reassigned. By breakfast, the taps were running again. The man who had repaired them was a German prisoner, and according to the camp roster, he was only a railway laborer. The failure could not have come at a worse time. The compound had grown quickly as German units collapsed, and prisoners arrived faster than the staff could process them. The water system fed the kitchen, wash points, latrines, and the small medical section. There were storage tanks, but not enough to carry the camp comfortably through a long shutdown. The duty lieutenant sent a request for a replacement mechanic. The answer was simple. No one was available that day. So the staff started rationing water. Men carried buckets to the medical hut. Kitchen workers filled every container they could find. A guard was posted near the pump house, mostly to keep prisoners away from equipment they had no authorization to touch. By mid-morning, the guard noticed something strange. The pressure gauge was moving. Then the pipe began to vibrate. A few seconds later, water struck the line hard enough to make the fittings jump. The pump was running. No American mechanic had arrived. The lieutenant went straight to the pump house. The panel was open. A length of worn packing had been removed and set neatly on the floor. The tools had been returned to the maintenance box. Nothing had been stolen. Nothing had been smashed. Someone had diagnosed the failure, improvised a repair, and left the space cleaner than he found it. The lieutenant's first problem was no longer the pump. It was finding the person who had fixed it. The roster was almost useless. Most prisoners had been processed with broad civilian occupations: clerk, driver, farmhand, machinist, railway worker, factory worker. Those labels were enough to sort men into basic work details. They were not enough to tell you who could rebuild a pump, repair a motor, weld a pipe, or recognize a failing bearing by sound. So the lieutenant changed the question. Instead of asking who had worked on the pump, he asked the work-deterred supervisors whether any prisoner had spent years maintaining industrial machinery. That produced one man. He had been entered as a railway laborer. Technically, that was true. But before the war, his work had not been loading freight or laying track. He had spent more than a decade in a railway repair shop maintaining pumps, motors, compressors, and the machinery that kept a large depot operating. The army had recorded the industry. It had missed the skill. When the lieutenant questioned him through an interpreter, the prisoner did not offer a dramatic explanation. He said he had heard the pump struggling before it stopped, not the silence, the sound before the silence. A rough, uneven knock in the line and a change in the motor's load. He recognized it because he had heard machines fail that way for years. He also knew the camp could not wait. So when the work detail passed near the maintenance area, he had asked another prisoner where the pump house was. Later, under supervision during the daytime work period, he pointed out the part he had removed and showed the lieutenant what he had done. It was not a permanent repair. That mattered. He said so himself, for the prisoner admitting that was not risk-free. He had entered a restricted maintenance space without orders. From the camp's perspective, that could look like tampering before it looked like initiative. A less careful explanation could have turned a useful repair into a security incident. So when the lieutenant asked whether he had touched anything else, the prisoner answered point by point. He described what he had opened, what he had removed, what he had reused, and what he had deliberately left alone because he did not have the material to fix it correctly. That restraint became part of the evidence. He was not claiming he could repair everything in the compound. He was identifying the boundary between what he knew and what he did not. And he warned them that if they simply treated the first repair as finished, the pump would fail again. The worn seal had failed, but the seal was not the real problem. The shaft was running slightly out of line. That vibration was chewing through the packing faster than it should. Replacing the packing would bring the water back. It would not stop the failure from returning. The lieutenant had the repair inspected by an American engineer from another installation when one became available. The engineer agreed with the diagnosis. So the prisoner was given the proper material and ordered to make the repair again, this time openly during working hours with a guard present. For 2 days the system held. Then the leak returned, not as badly as before, but enough to prove the prisoner had been right about the underlying cause. The easy response would have been to blame the first repair. Instead, the lieutenant asked him what he needed. The prisoner requested time to realign the mounting, replace the damaged packing, and check the coupling before the vibration damaged something more expensive. That was the moment the story changed. Until then, the camp had been treating his ability as an accident. A useful prisoner happened to know a useful trick. Now the staff understood that what looked like a one-time repair was actually a piece of professional judgment. He had not merely made the pump run, he had predicted why it would fail again. And when it did, his prediction held. The lieutenant wrote the incident into the camp report. The first version focused on the unauthorized access. The revised version focused on something more uncomfortable. The camp had been holding a skilled maintenance worker for days without knowing what he could do, even while requesting technical help from outside. The contradiction was hard to miss. The form had done exactly what it had been designed to do: reduce a crowded intake into categories that could be processed quickly. That efficiency had a blind side. Under normal conditions, a broad label might be enough to assign bunks and work details. Under collapse conditions, when trained personnel were being transferred, roads were crowded, and replacement parts moved slowly. The difference between laborer and industrial maintenance fitter could decide whether a critical system stayed down for an hour or for 2 days. The camp had discovered that difference only because something broke. A man with the exact experience they needed had been inside the wire the entire time. The system had seen prisoner status first, occupation second, and usable skill almost not at all. That report moved upward. The account later places the report within Third Army channels, under George S. Patton's command, amid the practical chaos of a collapsing front. Prisoners, displaced civilians, damaged roads, broken utilities, abandoned equipment, and towns that needed to function even before the war was formally over. The important question was not whether a German prisoner should be allowed to wander through a military installation. He should not. The question was whether the Army could distinguish between uncontrolled access and controlled use of verified skill. Those were not the same thing. The camp's answer was procedural. The prisoner remained a prisoner, he remained under guard. But his work assignment changed. Instead of being sent out with a general labor detail, he was assigned to supervised maintenance. The pump house was no longer a place he entered without permission. It became part of his authorized work area. The staff also changed the way it questioned new arrivals. Not everywhere, not as some sweeping reform, but at that compound the intake process became more specific. A man who said he had worked in a factory could now be asked what kind of factory. A railway worker could be asked whether he drove trains, repaired track, maintained engines, serviced electrical equipment, or worked in a machine shop. A mechanic could be asked what he actually repaired. That difference sounds small on paper. Inside a camp built faster than its staff could stabilize it, it was operationally enormous. The water pump became the proof. With the correct material and enough time to address the alignment problem, the prisoner completed the repair under supervision. The pressure stabilized. The leak stopped, the vibration disappeared, and the pump stayed in service through the remaining life of the compound. There was no ceremony, no speech, no moment where wartime identities suddenly ceased to matter. Germany was still at war when the incident began. The man was still being held by the army that had captured him. His skills did not erase that fact, and using those skills required limits, supervision, and a chain of responsibility. That was exactly why the second arrangement worked better than the first. The first repair depended on secrecy and improvisation. The permanent repair depended on recognition, materials, permission, and accountability. Competence had been there from the beginning. What changed was whether the system could see it clearly enough to use it without losing control of the situation. After Germany surrendered, the prisoner moved through the same screening and release process as other German servicemen whose cases did not bring additional charges. Eventually, he returned north. Hamburg was a city of damaged workshops, broken utilities, and industrial districts trying to restart with whatever equipment and manpower had survived. For a maintenance worker, the work was everywhere. Pumps had to run. Motors had to turn. Factories had to restart. Pipes, bearings, couplings, and electrical systems had to be made useful again, often before replacement parts were easy to obtain. The same kind of experience that had been nearly invisible on a prisoner intake form was suddenly part of what reconstruction required. But the most revealing part of the camp incident was not what happened years later. It was what the pump exposed in a single morning. The camp had not lacked information, it had lacked resolution. Railway worker was not false. It was simply too broad to be useful. The label answered where the man had worked. It did not answer what he knew. And under pressure, that missing distinction had a physical cost. Dry taps, ration buckets, a medical section counting stored water, and an army request moving up a chain for help that was already standing inside the fence. The prisoner had heard a machine fail. The lieutenant eventually heard something else. A bad question in the intake process. The next roster was different. Beside the prisoner's occupation, the staff added a second line. Maintenance of pumps, motors, and industrial machinery, more than 10 years. The machine had been repaired first. The record took longer.